Welcome to another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. Marco and David are out of town. They are visiting some Moriel friends in the great state of Texas. Therefore, you have me, and you also have Jacob Prash coming to you from New York. Jacob, how are you doing?
Well, my legs are elevated, hence my very awkward and unpresentable position, but please bear with me. I've been flying a lot, and I have another long flight ahead of me, so I've got to watch my edema and keep it down. Otherwise, I'm doing okay, even though I don't look very presentable at the moment.
I'm sure the viewers will give you some grace. Also, with us today, we have Davey down under. Davey, how are you doing, brother?
Yeah, morning. Doing pretty good, thanks. Although I wish it was kind of where you guys were. It'd be a little bit warmer than it's a bit cool here today.
You know what? I'll switch with you if you'd like. It is supposed to be pretty hot today, actually, here in California.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Now, an announcement real quick. For those of you that do not know, we have rolled out Moriel Chapel. Now, the reason why we're rolling this out, we are replacing the Be Alert for the time being with Moriel Chapel, because when YouTube gives us a strike, it affects the Bible studies, the Word for the Weekends, and also anything that we have as far as old lessons. So all of the materials that deal with, the faith, the Bible studies, anything to do with theology will be going to Moriel Chapel. News, current events will be going strictly to Moriel TV, which will become eventually Moriel Be Alert TV. So please bear with us. This is a time of transition. This is very necessary. As YouTube cracks down, especially during election season, it has become necessary for us so that we can continue to bring the messages of both the Word of God and current events, that we separate the two as to continue with the work of the Lord unhindered, hopefully. With that said, we want you to obviously please check out our podcasts. All of these recordings, whether they be the Bible studies, whether that be Ken's Corner, Catching Up with Jacob, all of these become podcasts and are put on the various venues for you to download and listen to whenever you're traveling. With that, I will turn it over to Jacob. Jacob, you have a few announcements as far as some speaking engagements?
A very few announcements, yes. But also, David Lister and Marco Quintana are apologetic. For those who are in Europe, you may not realize how big United States, Canada, and Australia are compared to other countries where we have Moriel branches. And because of the size, there are stretches of Australia, Canada, and the USA where the internet reception and Wi-Fi is not a very good connection. Now, obviously, if you're in Dallas or San Antonio or Austin or Fort Worth or something like that, or Houston, Texas is not a problem. But they're in a rural area of Texas, in a ranching area of Texas, and the connections are just not reliable enough. You can get the Wi-Fi, but it's not reliable enough to do a transmission. So I know people in America know that, but people in certain other countries may not realize you have those problems in the States, Australia, Canada, and so on. In any event, one or two other things, please. Continuous with what James shared. When we address contemporary events, world events, current events, from the point of view of Scripture, and we let our values, our convictions be known concerning issues such as LGBTQ, abortion, fundamentalist Islam, we expose ourselves to getting strikes or to being closed down or taken down. And as James pointed out, everything goes down with it. Hence, Moriel TV is going to become Moriel Be Alert TV, and all of the prophetic and current events material and so forth, looking at current events, news items and so forth, will be hosted on Moriel Be Alert TV. The Bible studies will be on Moriel Chapel. So in other words, just for clarification, although James explained it, what had been Moriel Be Alert is now Moriel Chapel. What had been Moriel TV is now Moriel Be Alert TV. Watch the Bible studies on Moriel Chapel, the biblical expositions on Moriel Chapel. Watch current events being examined in light of biblical prophecy and so forth on Moriel Be Alert TV. But there is a simpler way, and it's the way we would prefer. Watch us on morieltv.org or on moriel.tv or on RTN or simply on Rumble. You don't need YouTube. We don't need them. It's a convenient mechanism due to force of habit for people, so people tend to gravitate to it. But we don't need it. There are alternatives. We have our own service. There is Rumble, there's RTN, and again, Moriel.tv or MorielTV.org. We just don't need YouTube. We urge our people to watch on platforms other than YouTube. But if you do watch on YouTube, the biblical expositions, Bible studies, and so forth will henceforth be on Moriel Chapel. The contemporary events will be on Moriel Be Alert TV. So it is. This Saturday, I'm due to be speaking. That is the 27th of July at the Church of the Open Door in Manhattan. That's at Cooper Union Square, 3rd Avenue and East 7th Street. 3rd Avenue and East 7th Street in Manhattan, the Church of the Open Door at 7:30 p.m. The following day, the 28th of July, I'm scheduled to be at the Church of the Open Door in Baltimore. That'll be at 3 p.m. Details are available on the Moriel website itinerary page. Moriel.org, go to the itinerary page, and the details are there. On the 14th of the 24th and 25th of August, we're back in the UK. The 24th, we are going to be at Knowles Green in Preston. Knowles Green in Preston at 11 a.m. Details again on the Moriel website itinerary page, moriel.org. Knowles Green in Preston in the north of England. And then we're going to be with Pastor Mark Jackson in Woodruff Baptist Church in Hyde, Addersley Hyde, on the outskirts of Manchester, England. That will be on the 25th of August at 10:30 a.m. So again, Knowles Green and Preston will be 11 a.m. and near Manchester and Hyde, 10:30 a.m. with Pastor Mark Jackson. The 14th of September, we shall be in Brno, in the Czech Republic, at Majak Lisna. Majak Lisna in Brno on the 14th of September in the Czech Republic. That will be bilingual, English and Czech. The UK conference is already booking up. We have conferences in Scotland, but we have conferences in the UK where I will be joined by Pastor Marco Quintana, who'll be back with us in England. That'll be the 15th, the 17th in England. Booking details are available on the Moriel website, moriel.org, for the UK conference. The Scottish conference will be posted very soon. Pastor Marco Quintana will be joining us. Also in November, Pastor Tim Leach will be joining me in Tennessee and in Florida for meetings in the USA, I think it's going to be Pastor Tim Leach's first time preaching in America. But a lot of people in America have become familiar with him, and we've had a number of requests to bring him to the States. Hence, he shall be joining me. So Marco will be coming back to England. Pastor Tim Leach will be coming to the USA. That's it for me for the moment. James, back to you.
Thank you, Jacob. We will go ahead and get started with catching up.
Well, a tremendous spiritual darkness has come over Great Britain. It didn't begin with the election. The election of the socialist prime minister, who has a foreign minister hostile to Israel, and a justice minister who's hostile, or justice secretary hostile to Israel, is the culmination of a general trend. But it is not only anti-Israel, predictably it is anti-Christian. We are in the middle of a big legal battle in Britain at the moment, where a Christian math teacher, a saved Christian, a judge has ruled that his religious convictions as a Christian do not negate his responsibility to address a female student as a male if she wishes to be called a male. His argument was, as a matter of faith, he's not someone as being of the opposite sex. He has to abide by the biblical principles, which in fact are the scientific ones of X and Y chromosomes. Now, this would not happen, very likely, to a Muslim teacher, only to a Christian teacher. The judge has ruled against them in saying, you have no Christian rights or rights of religious conviction. And that way. Faith means nothing. The courts just don't care. A godless judge who's in all likelihood going to spend eternity in the lake of fire, based on Romans chapter 1. Those who give hearty approval to these things. 2, find a convenient way of coping with this by referring to people by their name. And now the courts are not only upholding it, but forcing Christians in the school systems to abide by it. There's a shortage of math teachers in England, yet this teacher may never be able to teach again because of his convictions that homosexuality and transgenderism are not natural and not morally acceptable.
Jacob, I wanted to get your take on the reaction to Brexit.
For the last 3 years, they have been arguing, and that is people from both Labour, Liberal Democrats, and establishment Tories, or roughly the British equivalent of rhinos, American rhinos. They've been blaming Brexit for the economic decline of Britain, or at least seeing it as a major contributing factor to the economic decline we see in Britain. This has been disingenuous. In fact, it's outright dishonest. No, Britain is not doing very well, but either is the EU or continental Europe. Germany, the economic dynamo of continental Europe and the biggest economy in the EU, has been in recession for nearly 4 years. 4 years of prolonged recession in Germany. The economic situation in France hovers above a precipice that is seeing a very serious economic decline of France, even within the EU. These are the 2 biggest economies. Europe itself is in trouble. And although Britain is not doing all that well, it has marginally, howbeit marginally, outperformed the EU in terms of controlling inflation, unemployment levels, and also economic growth. Not that Britain is doing that well. It isn't. But that Europe is doing worse. The EU is doing worse. This seems to be something we see happening a lot. Donald Trump, his approval ratings never get above 50% no matter what. He was only doing well because Joe Biden was doing so badly. It's not that Donald Trump was doing that magnificently well. It's just that his opponents are doing worse. This seems to be a trend that we see in many places, in many ways, both in the political realm and in the economic realm. Those who say they're doing good, well, they're not doing it that good. It's just that the others are doing worse. We see the same thing in the United States with the claims of Biden that America, in a post-COVID environment economically, is outperforming the other major economies. That's because China and Japan and Germany are not doing well. It's just that America under Biden is not doing as badly as Germany or China, that is now in decline, or Japan. This is something we need to understand. It's true of the claims of the Europhiles concerning Brexit. It's true of the claims of the present administration in Washington. It's true across the board. Those who claim to be doing well are not doing well. It's just that the others are doing worse. In Britain, they've simply taken it to a different level of dishonesty, blaming Brexit for the fact that Britain is not doing economically well, ignoring the fact that the larger economies of continental Europe and the EU are not doing well either. They're doing at least marginally worse. This is the reality, and we see it across the board.
Well, we apologize. We are having some technical issues. Fortunately, I think we are past them. Streams might be in a better condition. I did do as much as I can. We will move forward with the show. Jacob was talking about Brexit, and now we're going to move on to our next topic, which we're going to talk about John Kirby. And John Kirby recently came out and said, we do now know that Iran has been funding and encouraging some of the protest activity here in the United States. The question that I want to ask you, Jacob, is, are the Iranians funding the protests with the humanitarian aid money that we gave them, the billions of dollars that Biden gave back of frozen assets in 2023?
Frozen assets, but it was also not enforcing the embargoes that the Trump administration had imposed on Iran. Essentially, Biden and Harris, with the backing of the Obama machine, was funding Islamic terror through Iran. Just active funding of Iran, knowing that Iran was pursuing the development of nuclear weapons, knowing that Iran was funding terror, killing Americans. And what we see with the Houthis, what we see with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and what we see in Gaza with Hamas was all paid for courtesy of Biden, Harris, and Obama. Bibi Netanyahu could not address this for political reasons before the Congress. This is the reality of it. This is how wicked and corrupt the American government is, how corrupt the administration is. We've made it possible. The funding of these groups protesting, you see people in front of the fountain at Union Station defacing it, saying Hamas is coming with spray paint, and people kneeling down saying Allahu Akbar. Now, these are demonized savages who should not have ever been allowed in the country. But the floodgate was opened by the Bush administration after September 11th. It should have been closed before September 11th. And no corrupt government administration in the United States has done anything about it. When Donald Trump tried to do something about it, they were calling it a Muslim ban. When it was not a Muslim ban, it was simply saying we have to vet radical Muslims to be sure they don't get in. But of course, Obama, Bush, Biden wanted them in. The outrage of people standing opposite the United States Congress saying Hamas is coming, spray painting on American monuments, and kneeling down and chanting Allahu Akbar. This is an attacking policeman physically. This is an outrage. And the blame belongs at the doorstep of Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Harris.
Yeah. Now, go ahead, Davey.
I was going to say, it reminds me very much of the C.J. Dennis story, the Glugs of Gosh. It's what we sort of see happening in real time here. But I would probably agree with Netanyahu's comments. Those who were protesting, they're Iran's useful idiots. And what we're seeing is basically the war in the Middle East coming to the West.
Correct.
Now, Davey, not to be a contrarian, but are they useful idiots is a question that I would raise. We have a video, and I'd just like to bring it to your attention. So, just in time for Netanyahu, as you can see, we have buses bringing in these protesters, which means someone had to pay for those buses, which brings an even deeper question. Are these paid protesters? Are these contract protesters? There are such a thing in 2024 of people being paid to be professional protesters.
There's a lot of money in being a useful idiot these days. You've only got to look at the media and the news anchors and for an example of that. Touche. I concede. That point is perfectly put. There are lots of useful idiots, especially on the mainstream media. But to my point, do you think that a person in the IRS, say, could look and track down where these funds come from so that we could confirm where this money is being brought by? If it's coming from Iran, obviously there must be people, surrogates, that are funneling this money to the protesters, to the bus companies. The only problem with that is it'd be profiling, wouldn't it? That'd be racist.
That's true. That's not allowed in today's world. We have to go after a Christian that, was late on his income tax. That's right. Bigger question, Jacob, this begs the question, is there no such thing as a true grassroots movement anymore when it comes to protests?
If it is, they're going to be called white extremists, or they're going to be called something like that. They're going to be discredited as being racist or supremacists or something like this by the mainstream media and by the corrupt government. That is what you have. Any kind of populist movement that threatens the establishment, be it on the left or the right, they're going to come against in some way. That is why Biden got the nomination to run against Donald Trump instead of Bernie Sanders. It was a left-wing populist movement. They don't want anything that challenges the swamp. If something threatens the existence of the swamp, they do not want it. The swamp is there for the rats who inhabit it. These rats include the mainstream media and the mainstream political establishment of both parties. They're there to preserve their environment. That's what they want. It's about power. It's integrated into the international globalist network. It is the trend towards a neo-fascism. It is something that is certainly anti-American, anti-British, anti-Australian. But that doesn't matter to them. That is the way it works. Populist movements or grassroots movements. Look what they said about, taxed it up already, the Tea Party. That was a grassroots movement that was legitimate. When Barack Obama made war against working families in America, there was a reaction. What was the reaction? Well, Zelenskyism was the reaction.
Yes, that is so true, Jacob. My question, I guess, would also be, so the only allowed movement is really a corporate sponsored or a foreign caliphate sponsored movement nowadays.
That is correct.
Well, let's move on to our next story. Joe Biden has stepped down, and now we have Vice President Kamala Harris running now, and in 24 hours, raising $80 million. $80 million in a time when the American taxpayer definitely is feeling inflation. $80 million in 24 hours. That seems a little bit fishy. Can you give me your take on that, Jacob?
Well, you've got the Hollywood whores, the machine of Clooney and Katzenberg and these people. They can raise $80 million very quickly. But Harris is appearing on the internet asking people to send $10. And there's enough stupid people who will do it. I'm not surprised. I'm not at all surprised.
That's interesting because if you remember, there was a story about Go Blue, which was a Democrat fundraiser where one person would send in $10 and then they would mark it down that over the next 3 years, that same person from that same address gave $20,000.
Yes.
Almost as if the money did not come from that person, but they were claiming that it did.
Right.
Very interesting funding that the Democrat Party does. Moving on, let's see what else we got. It's an interesting thing that Jacob, for months and months, if you question Joe Biden as far as his mental state, if you even hinted he had dementia, the media would gather around him to protect him, saying, "Oh, he's all there. He's very cognizant of what's going on." It seems that the media has turned and is now wrapping that same protection around Kamala. If I might, I'm going to play a video of how this is taking shape.
First of all, it's going to be ugly. Incredible racism, sexism, and misogyny has been thrown at Harris all along.
She won't be backing down from any of those sexist and racist, disgusting statements that we are anticipating coming from the right.
Be prepared for the racist, sexist, and xenophobic tenor.
He is going to try to attack Senator Kamala Harris with both sexist and racist tropes.
He's reverted back to his racist and sexist tropes.
VP pick Kamala Harris responds to racist and sexist attacks.
Sexist and racist attacks.
Racist and sexist attacks. I wonder what you make of these racist and sexist attacks.
Attacks that can only be described as sexist and racist.
Sexist, sort of racist attacks.
Sexist and racist language about her.
Part of the reason why these attacks work is because they play on such deeply ingrained gender and racist biases in our culture.
It's very important that we all are cognizant of the racism around us, the misogyny around us. All of us are guilty of it. The right-wing media, Tiffany, are going to be racist. They're going to be sexist. We know that.
Vice President Kamala Harris needs to be more humbled.
Absurd. And we've gotten to the point where I'm ready to call this stuff racist and sexist.
Republicans launch racist and sexist attacks against Senator Kamala Harris.
Racist and sexist tropes.
Sexist attacks and racist attacks.
The racist and sexist attacks, they are racist, they are sexist.
Racist, sexist, and deeply misogynistic.
There are a few things that you said, like keeping the America that I know and love, or calling Kamala Harris an angry or mean woman, that some people look at as racist or sexist.
Jacob, last week, I seem to recall the same media saying that we need to lower the volume of the rhetoric and not try to provoke anyone to violence, that we need to be more accepting. Yet here we are 1 week away, 1 week later, and it seems that they're falling back into the same routine where they're going to accuse someone of what is the most vile thing you can mark someone with is basically racism.
Okay. Politics is a game of whores. It's of, by, and for whores. It's a whore's game. A prostitute on a street corner has more integrity than a politician. We have to remember that. Nations get the leaders they deserve. They don't want statesmen. They want politicians. That's all they are. That's all they want. It is a whore's game. Unable to deny factual reality, they have to engage in instant media-driven revisionism and rewrite history. They can't respond to the fact that Harris was never, ever anything other than the border czar or czaress. Oh, she never was. This is racist and sexist. That she lied and conspired with the media, that same media, to say that Biden was compos mentis, knowing they lied. You're supposed to forget the fact that we lied. We have to change the narrative. This is sexist and this is racist. What they resort to is the only thing they can. They cannot deal with the facts of the economic malperformance of Biden, of the withdrawal from Afghanistan and what it triggered in the Ukraine and with Iran. They cannot deal with the provision of money, 150 to 300 billion to Iran by Obama and Biden. They cannot deal with the inflation, the increased energy costs. They cannot deal with any of the failures. They cannot deal with what they even said last week. So they have to resort to two things, or two versions of the same thing. Goebbels and Zelensky. Goebbels being the Nazi propaganda minister of Hitler. Tell a lie often enough and people will think it's the truth. And Zelensky, when you can't respond to the issue, yell racism, yell sexism, yell anyism, and just keep saying the same thing. This is racist, biased. This is misogyny. Wait a minute. The woman, she was protecting Biden, knowing that he was not compos mentis. She lied to us. She lied to this. This is racist. That's all they can do. They have to resort to Zelenskyism. But there's enough people with subhuman intelligence in the United States, enough people with subhuman levels of intelligence who will believe it. These are the people who watch The View. Now, obviously, there are some black people who see through this, but they're hated by the mainstream media. There are some Hispanics who see through it, but they are hated. There are some women who see through it, but they're hated. It all is Goebbels. It's Zelenskyism. It is what put Hitler in power. It is what put Lenin in power. That's all it is. Remember that Stalin and Hitler were both socialists. That's what this is. They can't deal with the facts, with the failures of the Biden administration and Harris's role in it. They can't even come to terms with what they themselves said last week. So they have to come out, racist, 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 sexist, sexist, sexist. That's all they can do because they cannot address the issues. But again, you have enough people who are deluded, who are spiritually blinded, and who are frankly just stupid. They'll listen to Joyce Behar or Whoopi Goldberg instead of using their brain, assuming they had a brain to use. This is what you are dealing with. Now let's go a bit further with this. You have managed media to divert attention away from the attempted assassination on Donald Trump. They have to find something else. So people will not look at those heroic images of Donald Trump covered in blood and standing up after being shot. They get ready to say he may not have been shot. the FBI director, who should be forced to resign the same as Cheadle. Medical evidence says otherwise. Lay it down. Then, when Benjamin Netanyahu gives his speech, highlighting the fact that this is Iranian-funded and the useful idiots and things that are irrefutable, no sooner does he finish his speech, when an hour later, 1 hour, stand by for Joe Biden's speech, explaining his resignation, where he did what he usually does, fumbles and lies. He did not admit that there was a political coup d'etat. Once more, the week before last, he was saying he would not withdraw from the election unless God Almighty told him to. Well, it wasn't God Almighty. It was Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and Chuck Schumer. The week before last, he was saying he's the only one who can beat Donald Trump. Now he's saying Harris is the one who can beat Donald Trump. They want you to forget what they themselves said last week. Again, this is Orwellian. It's exactly what Orwell said. They just keep adjusting the narrative. An enemy, oh, they're our friend. They've always been our friend. A friend, they're our enemy. They've always been our enemy. They just change the narrative week to week and just keep saying it. It's Orwellian.
Yeah.
It is Olenskiist. And it is Nazi. That is what you are dealing with. And there's enough stupid people to subscribe to it. I believe the stupidity of such a high percentage of the public is, in part, a divine judgment. They don't believe in God, so God gives them over to depravity. Take the abortion issue, which is the only issue they really had to campaign on, of any substance. Well, 70% of abortion clinics are in and around minority neighborhoods, particularly Afro-American. Harris wants late-term abortion up to the time of birth, even though that black baby can be born and have a natural life at 30 or 35 weeks gestation, certainly. No, you can abort it up to 40 weeks. Harris wants dead black babies. I don't. That's the reality. This non-therapeutic abortion is the way the party of Jim Crow, slavery, and the Klan calls the Afro-American population. They control future prison populations, future welfare rolls, by killing blacks in their mother's womb. That's their policy. And unfortunately, just because she's black, many blacks are going to vote for her. They vote for their own death. The fact that even the majority of women nationally do not agree with late-term abortion. They make themselves the spokesman for women and say, unless you agree with it, you're misogynist and going against women, as if they represent the majority of women. All they do is lie. It is Olensky. It is Goebbels. It is the White House press secretary. It is MSNBC. It is CNN. It is the Washington Compost and the New York Slimes. It is the BBC. That is the way it works. The one hope I see is that God did preserve Donald Trump's life. Now, I do not think that Donald Trump is God's agent. I do not think he's a Christian in the biblical sense. I think the evangelicals who surrounded him have largely been false teachers and false prophets like Paula White. I have nothing positive to say about the Republican Party. They essentially lost the midterm elections in 2022 that they should have won handsomely. And I can see them losing the upcoming elections unless God intervenes. It is the Lord who establishes kings and removes kings. I have no trust in the Republican National Committee. I don't care about their convention. I don't trust them, I don't respect them, and I have no confidence in them. I do not believe that Donald Trump is an agent of Jesus. God may establish him. I'd obviously rather have him than Harris. However, these Christians are deluded in thinking that it's some kind of a Christian salvation. It is not a Christian salvation. Mr. Trump himself has backpedaled on abortion to a degree, albeit with political motives, and he has certainly compromised on the issue of same-sex to a degree with his gala at Mar-a-Lago. Now, is he a lesser of evils? Yes. But a lesser of evils is an evil no less. Would I rather have him than the alternative, than Harris? Of course I would. I'd rather have Jack the Ripper than Harris. But is my hope in him? No, my hope is in Jesus. And unless we pray, really pray, Harris could very well be elected. There's enough stupid people. The Republican Party is that incompetent and inept. They proved it in 2022. I listened to these windbags confidently stating things that turn out to be rubbish. I mean, people like Newt Gingrich and Dick Morris with their confidence and pronouncement. They just talk a lot of garbage. They're proven to be losers. As pundits, they are proven losers. They proved it in 2022. We are supposed to forget what Biden and Harris said last week? Well, are we supposed to also forget what Newt Gingrich and Dick Morris said last week? You can't trust any of them. None of them have any credibility. Christians should stop being naive. We need to look to Jesus. We need to pray. That's the only thing going to make a difference. Now, there is a divine justice. A wicked servant of the devil, Sheila Jackson Lee, was summoned to the judgment seat of Christ this past week. She was a racist, a vicious woman, an enemy of democracy, and an idiot, a commensurate idiot, because of her race and gender. She was on the Congressional Oversight Committee overseeing NASA. This moronic woman, who's now dead, was telling children the moon is a planet that is mainly composed of cosmic gases. When a probe went to Mars, she asked, will they be able to see the debris the Apollo astronauts left on the moon, on the lunar surface? This woman was an idiot, a complete idiot. How can an idiot who knows nothing about, a high school student knows more about space than she does, but because she's a Democrat, because she's a woman, because she's a black, she gets to be on the NASA committee? And if you point that out and you point out what she said, Oh, you're a racist. You're a misogynist. As I've said repeatedly, some of the most intelligent people in the United States are Black. Thomas Sowell. If there's anybody America should listen to, it is him. You've had brilliant Blacks like Professor Walter Williams, the late Herman Cain, who they persecuted, basically. Dr. Ben Carson, greatest pediatric brain surgeon in the world. Some of the smartest people in the United States are Black, but they prefer morons like Sheila Jackson Lee and the cackling bimbo Harris. It's all manipulated. These Blacks are simply stooges of the Democratic Party establishment. They are the house slaves of the 21st century, as opposed to the field slaves. It's exactly what you had in the 19th century American South. Field slaves and house slaves. Harris is a house slave. Obama is a house slave. But most Black people are out in the field, now called the housing projects, the ghettos, the inner cities. This is the reality.
Jacob, do you mind if I ask you a question? You just reminded me of something I saw this week. I mean, you've got the narrative out there where they really haven't got any policies to run on, so it's kind of like they got us playing to the other side by, demonizing them, by saying they're racist, they're sexist, and all the rest of it. But you've also had these, you also seen this come from the Christian community. I hate saying the Christian community, but so-called Christian community, and where they also praise Kamala up to some kind of like sainthood or trying to make her out better than what she is. But you had, I think his name was Amos Brown. I think he was Kamala's pastor back in San Francisco or whatever. But he was, he did a sermon and he was comparing her to Gandhi and Margaret Thatcher. So,
yes.
Yeah, did you want to comment on that?
You have the traditional Afro-American Baptist and Pentecostal holiness tradition. This tradition dates back again to the early 19th, late 18th century. And it has given Black America its real leadership that began civil rights. I speak of people like Booker T. Washington and Frederick Douglass. I speak of Harriet Tubman. I speak of people who were genuinely Christian and who were genuinely noble in their motives. But then you have those who simply see the church as a political platform to try to use religion to make their cause political, or a political cause religious. These are theologically liberal people. They're not born again, generally speaking. That is where he comes from. Now, I look at Judge Joe Brown, a Black American, well-known figure in America. He told the truth. Harris had an affair with Willie Brown, former mayor of San Francisco, turned Speaker of the State Assembly. She had an immoral affair with the husband of another Black American woman. She engaged in an adulterous relationship with him, or he with her. He put her where she is in terms of his political support as district attorney and senator. I said this before. You've got at least 3 kinds of prostitutes in California. You have the ones who stand on the corner of Santa Monica Boulevard, on the sleazy end of it, down past the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, on the other side, than the east side of the sign, the Hollywood side. That's where they hang out. Those prostitutes get paid in cash. Then you have the Harvey Weinstein prostitutes, the couch casting. They get paid with bits in movies and films. They're the second kind of California prostitute. The third kind of California prostitute is Kamala Harris, who gets paid in political endorsements. The woman is nothing more than a paid whore. That's what she is. That's all she is. A cackling bimbo, a giggling idiot, and a paid whore, a professional paid whore. Paid for money? No. Paid politically with political endorsements with Willie Brown. Sleeping with the husband of another Black American woman. This is what she is. The fact that she's morally bankrupt, the fact that she's a paid whore, means nothing to that pastor. He has no scruples and no morals either. Where's the holiness? Yeah. That is not traditional Black American Christianity. That is not the Christianity that gave us, in part, the abolitionist movement and gave us civil rights. That is not the Christianity of Harriet Tubman. That is not the Christianity of George Washington Carver. That is not the Christianity of Frederick Douglass. That is not the Christianity of Booker T. Washington. It is another so-called Christianity that's not Christian at all. It's politics. And politics is a whore's game. And she is nothing but a paid whore.
Listen, thank you, Jacob.
Davey and Jacob, I'd like to ask you both this question because this, while you were talking, Jacob, came into my mind. The calculus, I think, tell me if you think that I'm onto something here. The calculus is that you have a Black woman on stage with Donald Trump on a debate, and Donald Trump hammers her for not being factual, not being on topic, being disingenuous with that cackle, and then the media will spin it to the point where, oh, look at Donald Trump, a white man, abusing a Black woman on a national stage.
Of course.
Yeah.
And NBC and CNN, the Clinton News Network, will make sure it's portrayed that way.
Yeah.
Davey, let me ask you a question real quick.
Yep.
When you're an outsider, you're from Australia, when you hear the media drone on about racism, about her being a Black woman, a misogynist, is there any parallel in Australia that can even compare to the circus show that is United States politics and media?
Okay, well, I'm trying to think of their parallels. Well, maybe not so much with the same, the racist, sexist thing as much, but you do see the same sort of thing operating, though. It's where it's just a narrative. The media pump out the narrative. People, the gullible public, don't critically discern. They don't think for themselves. They just take the narrative in and it becomes part of them. They really don't. I guess we do sort of hear the chants of racism and other things come up with different issues, maybe not political, maybe not with our political leaders quite so much, but you see the same thing happening here. And I think Australians, by and large, we don't have the alternative media here, so they're a lot more manipulated, I should say, by the narrative that's out there. They get it constantly drummed into us, especially, the kids coming up out of uni and all the rest of it. It's just the same as the unis overseas. because they're getting the same funding and they're getting the same garbage shoved down their throats.
DEI replacement there.
Yeah. Yep.
We're going to move on to our next topic. This one is about CrowdStrike. Just a reminder, CrowdStrike was a cybersecurity company that the DNC hired to frame Russia for the hacked DNC emails by Julian Assange via WikiLeaks. Flashback to October 2016 when the MSM in Hollywood were trying to establish the Russian narrative. CrowdStrike was one of the main entities that created the Russian hoax. Now, move forward to today. CrowdStrike had a software update that caused the outage of 8.5 million Windows computers. The ripple effect was felt throughout many industries. One of the most hard-hitting ones was the airlines. Delta canceled more flights in that week due to the global outage than it did for 2 years. Between Friday and Tuesday, Delta canceled 5,470 flights. In 2018 and 19 combined, it canceled 5,370. This CrowdStrike, can you comment a little bit on this, Jacob? What do you see here with this company that has its ties to the DNC? And now, last week, we have an outage, a major outage, both institutionally for investments, for banking, but also for transportation.
The grounds for suspicion of a connection between the two are obvious. But let's begin at the beginning. This was the same mechanism that was instrumental in the Russian collusion hoax. They were a partner in the Russian collusion hoax, to the best of my understanding. Why should anybody pay attention to anything they say now? It looks like the muck tossers are just tossing more muck. The mud shovelers are just shoveling more mud. Given what they've done in the past, why should we pay any attention to anything they say now? Oh, this is coming from Russia. You lied about Russia in the past. Now, I have no love for Mr. Putin's government. He's a bad man. I've always said he was a bad man. I would not put anything past him. But I know how the DNC lied. Therefore, I cannot believe anything they say now. Much less can I believe any agency or company that has been party to their deception and dishonesty in the past. I'm not qualified to comment on the cybertechnic aspects or the plausibility of the proposition that there's a connection with the takedown of certain cyber systems. I can't. It's above my pay grade. But I do know that they have no credibility. That you shouldn't believe anything they say.
Jacob, to your point, you kind of connected the dots that I wanted to connect. So we went from them presenting the Russian hoax, but somehow from the time of 2016, flash forward to 2024, they are responsible for the outages of 8.5 million Windows PCs because their software is now on many of these computers. Davey, talk to me a little bit about what you think. Now, was it just a software accident that they had? Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, I don't believe it was an accident. I believe this was deliberate. There's no way I can believe this was an accident because basically they've got to test every update before they actually release it. I do believe this was a deliberate attack. I can only speculate as to why and what, whether it's a forerunner of something that's to come or anything like that. But also here in Australia, look, most of our government services relied on it. They were all affected. It caused a lot of disruption. But yeah, look, I do think it may be a forerunner of something to come. We do know that, look, BlackRock, Vanguard were two of the largest investors in CrowdStrike. There's just no way I can believe this was accidental.
Yeah, there is something going on with them, and the fact that it seems that this company that obviously, as Jacob said, has no credibility, is basically in charge of major software updates. Their software is on government computers, it's on transportation, it's on financial. The reach of this company is incredible.
Yeah, which makes you wonder why, why. Also, they are a World Economic Forum partner. So does that give the World Economic Forum inroads to, government operations? Can they interfere in government operations? I would say yes, and I think this was kind of like proof of it. And as I said, I believe this is a forerunner for something worse to come.
You remember the strange case of James McAfee? Do you remember that a little bit? And how he, at one time, his software was on every single PC computer. Anything that had a Windows box had McAfee anti-spyware software on it. And supposedly he had large caches of data that he had pulled from all these different computers that he wanted to release before he mysteriously died. Very, very interesting parallel. It might be something very similar where CrowdStrike took a playbook out of McAfee and said, here, we want to enhance your security. Make sure that no hackers can take your data. Here, let us put our software on you.
Yeah. Well, the way the CrowdStrike had promoted themselves too, very much so, is kind of like, and then this happens.
Yes.
Yeah, it could very well be the case. I think things will become clearer as we go down the track, but and it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and especially around election time.
Go ahead, Jacobs.
We are told in Peter not to be surprised if some strange thing were happening to you. Your enemy, the devil, goes around. Whatever the reason for this is, it's been a hopeless abortion this week. We've had nothing but technical problems that we don't usually have, at least not to this degree. So we're going to have to just leave this week's catching up, but we did get the main points in, thankfully. We did manage to get the main points in and address those issues that we wanted to. What I'd like to leave people with again is, please pray. Please pray that God intervenes in the American political system. The devil is active. The media is corrupt. The government is corrupt. Everything is corrupt. There's nothing good. Nothing good. America and the Western world deserve nothing but God's judgment. Nothing. We can only implore him to show us mercy. I am convinced he did intervene and save the life of Donald Trump. May he have done that for good. Please pray that God will raise his hand against the proponents of non-therapeutic abortion, of LGBTQ, of pandering to radical Islam and to the enemies of Israel and the enemies of the body of Christ. We can pray. We can appeal. Satan is the god of this world. He lives in the White House. He lives in number 10 Downing Street. We know that. He lives in the corridors of power in Congress and Parliament. He controls these evil people. He controls them. He controls Hollywood. He controls the deep state. The world is in the power of the wicked one. But ultimately, Jesus is Lord. He is coming. And in the meanwhile, we can pray and ask that his hand would intervene. Please, please pray. Pray for Britain, pray for Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and please pray for the United States, that God's hand would intervene in these situations. Thank you so very much. We hope to be back on board next week. One final thing. I gave the wrong dates for the UK conference. I gave last year's dates for the November conference. They are earlier. Please go to the Morio website, morio.org, and see the dates. I believe they are the 7th of November, the weekend of the 7th, for the UK conference of Moria with Marco Quintana and myself. That's just a correction. Be that as it may, at least we got the main points in by God's grace. Thank you for joining us. God bless.
God bless. Sorry, everyone. Usually, like Jacob said, we do not have these technical difficulties, but we are really experiencing quite a few. Who knows why? But we do want to thank you for watching, and we will be back, hopefully, with a lot of these problems ironed out. So God bless. Have a wonderful week from the team here. Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.